People buy into your excitement. That's the most consistent feedback I get when I'm presenting is we love your energy, we love your passion, and it does all come from an authentic place. But I think sometimes sometimes it's not the best for facilitating a conversation, right? Because um I'm well aware I'm not the end all be all or even anywhere close to having the right opinion or an opinion that even needs to be heard in any given scenario. So I find myself doing what you did a lot leaving that meeting, which is, did I talk too much? I wish I hadn't said X, Y, and Z. I try to be reflective about that. And then in this scenario, I get to listen back to it verbatim, and there's no hiding it. There's no hiding from it in there, and it's excruciating. But good.
Okay,
Good for
but
me.
on the like, self-growth plane, right? I think that what you guys are both talking about is something that it requires vulnerability. It's hard to not only do, but then to talk about it to other people, especially your professional colleagues, right? And so I think this quest of, well, I want to be the best version of myself and I want to think about how I'm showing up in spaces and be intentional about um how this is tying to my, that's a value judgment that you made, right, Stefan? And I think my hope for the world is that instead of feeling like the goal is to be neurotypical, because I don't think that's a true thing. I think it's a spectrum and everybody falls on the spectrum, which we have held up this idea of normalcy, but I don't know that that's or typical, right? I don't know that that's the best way to see it for education because I think about all of our students and all of their brains and that's what we should be leaning into, not trying to figure out, oh, how can I be the most typical or, fall into this, you know, quote unquote box of the way it's supposed to be. I think it's how do I be the best version of myself, knowing how my brain works and how, my personality works um, and use that to my advantage. I just feel like that's such a healthier mindset for our young people than, um, than you need to be this set of like there's a criteria that's going to count for if you're successful or normal, right? And I think so many kids get the message that, well, if you don't do it this way, then you're not going to be successful. And it takes time. And our theme, right, is as we get it, the world that we're living in, it's not meant to stop and slow down and reflect and think about, did I show up the way I wanted to? How could I have been perceived? What do I want to do differently next time? It's just, oh, go to the next thing, whether it's just the pace at which we're expected to live our lives or when we're on our devices and in these digital spaces and you're really being pressed to just move forward as quickly as you can and not do a lot of reflecting.
Childhood isn't broken, but it is being reprogrammed. This is The Slow Scroll, a conversation about kids, tech, and the slow work of growing up in a world built for instant everything. We're not here to romanticize the past or panic about the future. We're here to think harder about what kids need, what adults missed, and how schools can be a place to get it right. Each episode is a chance to untangle the messy intersection of tech, identity, learning, and growth with curiosity, honesty, and a deep respect for what childhood can still be.
And I put this, was it in Slack the other day when I don't know, was feeling a little froggy. And when you were in that meeting, and I was like, the more people use the term equity, the less I believe that anybody actually knows what it means, which makes me think maybe I don't know what it means. But my understanding is that equity means everybody gets what they need. And then when you take that example, when it's literally just equality with a salary cap, like everybody pays 5,000, like it is inherently inequitable, but we've tagged equity on it because we haven't, to your point, Vanessa, gotten the right people in the room. We haven't had actual uncomfortable conversations. We're not working within a space where we truly feel okay admitting that we don't know, but we'll be given the time to go find the answer, you know? Mm-hmm. And so I think well-meaning things are done all the time. They end up doing more harm than good, which specifically makes me think of, have you guys ever been forced to, or maybe you've led one, the privilege walk? You ever done that?
I have never done it myself, but I have watched videos, and I don't know, ironic or not, I actually watched it with my son the other day because we were having an interesting conversation.
It's just, it is.
I don't even know what it is.
You all start in the same place, like along a line, and then they will read a statement. And if that applies to you, you take a step forward. And like, spoiler alert, the statements all have to do with some kind of privilege. So there are things like both of your parents are still married. You went to a private high school, or you went to a private college, you graduated college, you never had to worry about having like where your next meal is, those types of things, right? Mm-hmm. And now granted, the one I'm thinking of, I went through as a 23-year-old dude, not the most mature, evolved person on the planet. Still, like I get it. We've all got to, but like, I really hope nobody's judging me based off of what I was like in 2013, you know?
Yeah.
I remember coming home to Anna going, it just made me feel like I am so, this was my reaction at the time. I am so sorry that both of my parents are still married. You know, I am so sorry that I took advantage of the tools that were given to me to graduate college and go into the teaching profession. Like, that's the way it made me feel. It manufactured that guilt. Now, was that the purpose of the activity? No. Because what you do is you then look around, everybody's at a different spot, and they're supposed to lead this conversation around, like, look, we all come from different places, and like your kids are all going to be in different places. And so just know that despite the privileges you've had, not everybody is literally where you stand in your shoes. But it's so personal. Like, I have yet to meet someone who's gone through that and thought that was a good idea. And again, maybe there's some bias in that. But that's so personal. It ends up feeling like right and wrong. Like, the people who are closer to the starting line, well, those are the people that were right because they haven't had as many privileges and they're here. And you, Stefan, who has led a pretty privileged life, like middle class, white male, parents still married, right?
The best you could do is be a teacher.
I'm not sure I ever didn't take a step, right? And again, that, like, if I wasn't so immature, maybe I take that differently. However, there are ways to do that. So, I mean, it was literally like a week ago. I was complaining about just not that scenario, because that would just be pathetic. That was like 15 years ago. Let's get over it.
Get over it already.
But I think I offhandedly said something like, "What, are they going to make us do a freaking privilege walk?" And Anna said, "Have you ever seen how Emily does it? She's a coworker of ours." I said, "No." She goes, "She gives teachers like a student profile, and then they answer the questions based off that student profile." Boom. I think that is the perfect fix, because it takes the focus off of you. It probably leads to some self-reflection, but you can do it privately, and it keeps the focus on the kids. Like, that's great. But I think so often we're like, well, you need to recognize your own privilege, which I think is true for the record. But we end up guilting and shaming people versus opening the door to conversation.
Okay, so
Vanessa's like, I love privilege walks.
Yeah.
I do.
Oh,
But everybody has like their different lens, right, from which they're coming from. I wonder if your experience maybe wasn't well facilitated and that shaped the way that you viewed it, because I guess the value that I see is not necessarily shaming others, but like bringing to the surface all of these things that like we as an individual might take for granted or not understand how that influenced our life positively or negatively. And I think like bringing that to the forefront and not just having the walk and then nothing happens, but you mentioned, the students doing some sort of survey, them reflecting, that sort of thing. I think that's fine, but you're not going to grow. If you know it, you've reflected on it. No one else is learning from that specific example. And, if I had a magic wand, I guess my suggestion would be like, how is that then part of discourse for students to talk about? And maybe there needs to be some sort of like context and framing and, what's appropriate, what's not, and maybe even something to support kind of what you mentioned, the feelings that came to surface. And like, this is a common experience, especially, um, if you are male from a middle class background, blah, blah, blah. And despite feeling uncomfortable, like, here's why we need to dive deeper into that or something. So, I mean, maybe the activity is hit or miss, but the conversation I was having with my son around it is he had kind of said some like short backhanded things to me, um, kind of around what you were talking about, like, you know, um, something with a friend group, and like, we all have struggles, but, you know, get over it and you still have to make do. And so I wanted to just surface that for him. Like, you are very fortunate and your experience is not everybody else's experience. So I think in our last conversation, we talked about kindness, and I feel like that's maybe overly simplistic, but that was kind of my message to him is like, you have no idea. But there's certain things that have been your experience and that frames how you look at things. And that may not be everybody else's. So the least you can do is be kind and try to extend them grace.
And to your
Yeah.
point, I think it is the conversation that, right, that's what matters. And I would absolutely agree. Probably the distaste for me is that it was just poor facilitation.
Sure.
Like it's the like everything else we do, the purpose of the activity is not the activity itself, it's the conversation it should spark.
Hmm.
Well, and I think okay, so can I chime in as a neutral? Never
Yes.
didn't know what a
Yes.
privilege walk was before I did this. I would say I kind of did something similar though when I learned about ACEs, like ACE scores, and then adverse childhood experiences for our listeners if they don't know what an ACE is. But um where we had to, yeah, like score yourself on what your ACE number would be in a staff meeting. And so that was kind of like, whoa, wasn't expecting to delve into addictions that my parents might have had like at work today, you know? Um, and so that's, I think that this is when we're talking about, let's talk about equity in ways that matter. I think this is the important thinking and discussions that need to happen. But I also think you have to sort of not just facilitate that moment, but everything leading up to that moment, right? So again, it goes back to, are we in a expected and safe place to do this right now? Because if it's my first day of new teacher orientation, I might not be expecting or ready in this place with all these people to have this conversation in a meaningful way. I might be ready to do it at a staff meeting, but again, not if I just show up and bam, it's dropped in my lap, but if maybe we had built up to it and there was some preparation for it, right? So I don't think it's that it's bad PD, don't ask adults to think about this, because I do think that's necessary. And I do think it models this this need, again, self-reflection and ongoing growth. And I think sometimes as adults, we think we get to that point where we have arrived. I think as teachers in our practice, oh, we have arrived. I have no more to learn, or because I've been doing this for so long. And that's what we really are at the heart of what we're all talking about. Is like, what we want to shift is this. No, there's always something more to learn. And what's the next thing? It's not that you're done. And so I like that it is encouraging that type of thinking that is potentially meaningful. And then that would then maybe spark like, then, yeah, how do we facilitate this for students? Right. But I think so I like that. So, okay, maybe there is a way we're going to do this, where we're not going to use personal data. We're going to use student data. Maybe that's a good entry point. Right. But I remember showing up to like what I thought was going to be a classroom management seminar, and they did this trickery where they said, you have to be in control of your own, emotions before you can manage a whole classroom of other people's emotions. And that it really became your own inner work to be ready to show up, to be the person your students needed. And so there is that level of, no, you do have some inner work to do. I won't get into it now. I do have a whole theory on how learning is spiritual. And when we don't approach it that way, we're missing part of the holistic piece of learning. That can be a different conversation sometimes, but I just think that we're missing some of those like heart things that really make learning meaningful.
Well, I mean, how do you say education's all about the relationships and not have some element of heart, right? Or spirituality in there? I think those two just go hand in hand. Because was something you said about being the right place and the right community and the right people, the right time, made me think of something else that happened that same day earlier. That I look back on very, very fondly because I respected the hell out of it. So there's that was later in the day. The whole privilege watch thing was, but we were supposed to watch Dennis the Menace, The Goonies, and The Sandlot and talk about those two great movies and one overrated one. And here we are talking about my teacher orientation because I apologized to Vanessa for talking over her.
We're going back. You said we could draw the line.
Earlier in that day, the superintendent, who's my current superintendent, came in, all the new teachers in one room, and she introduces herself and she says, this is what we're about. We love kids. We work hard. We take care of our community. Like, essentially the core values of the district. And she kind of lays those out. And then she says, and if you don't agree with anything I just said, you can leave. A bunch of brand new teachers. And I was like, oh, that's okay. And she looked at us and she sat there and let us think about that. And she wasn't just like, oh, just kidding. Or like, then leave. She sat there stood there with an authoritative presence and was like, I said it, I meant it, and you need to think about it. and then later that day, I was like, that was the coolest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. Like a leader that comes in, espouses their values and says, if you don't like it, you don't belong here. And I think the reason I like it is because like their values I agreed with, right? But because she had come in, she's like, we are here at 8, we leave at 2:45. And if a parent calls you, you do not answer. And it's the kid's responsibility to learn and not yours. You just teach from the textbook. And if you don't like that, you can leave. I'd have been like, what the heck am I doing here?
Yeah.
But she comes in with this hard line. But I think the reason I like that, even though that was very uncomfortable, was one, I agreed with the message. And two, she was in a position of authority where I think that's kind of her job, is she's not working with us day to day, and like, it's not her job to coddle us. It's her job to drive the vision of the district and be a firm visionary leader and communicate that very clearly. And she did an amazing job. So I think like the role you have also plays a major part. And, we know relationships can look different at every level. And so, had she come in and tried to facilitate the privilege walk, I think that would have been appropriate. It was a handful of instructional coaches who did it, and their job was to have those conversations with us. I, again, just think it could have been done a little bit more effectively. You guys would have done a much better job.
Oh, I don't know about that, but
It sure as heck sounds like it, Vanessa.
Vanessa actually has her script. She goes, actually, I have one prepared. You guys want to do a privilege walk with me?
well, no, but I guess, similar to all of the pieces that we talk about, good PD or just good teaching in general, to both of your points, like as the facilitator of that, the preparation matters, and taking the time and the space, like just to set the right environment so that people understand before they go and engage in the activity. Maybe there's some like pre-reading or pre-discussion that happens, like in addition to the discourse after. I think those things are so vital. Otherwise, I think you're kind of fighting against our own nature, which is like, I don't understand why that I'm doing this. I feel like a jerk. And what is this going to do, for me and my practice after the fact? So, then those that are engaging in it, I don't think are doing so in a meaningful way where reflection will be beneficial.
Well, and what I loved about what you did is like you saw essentially a teachable moment with your kid, and you're like, let's unpack that, which is so crazy thoughtful. But that's what good teaching is too, right? Like you can't plan for everything, but when you see a teachable moment that you can capitalize on and make value out of that moment, I think that's really important. Because had you sat your son down and been like, look, we're going to do the ACEs scale, or we're going to do a privilege walk, or like you tried to explicitly teach that. And I don't know how that interaction with your son went, but I think that's just, it's organic. It's in the moment. It's just in time for that to be able to say, who doesn't do a good job of thinking about people other than themselves are your son's 14 or 14-year-olds.
Yeah.
I think the difference there is like the willingness to listen and recognize that you don't know and you don't have all of the answers. Conversely, the story that's always going through my head is when Micah was born. His birth mother, we were, I'm sure I've told you guys this story before. We're paying for her housing. She was living in a hotel for a little bit. And have I told you this about how like when she was in resources, did you have the resources that the social worker gave you? Because we're about to be done paying for housing. Resources. All anyone ever gives me is resources. No one ever does anything for me. And like, I don't know how to reconcile that with a woman who's in her mid-40s, who's currently living with her adult daughter and her adult son and her teenage son in Las Vegas, who thinks nobody ever does anything for her, versus knowing that there are people out there who are really struggling. And like, that's equity, right? How do you give everybody what they need? And still, that one's tricky. Right. But I think the difference there is a willingness to listen and be self-reflective and understanding and empathetic. And I think it starts, I don't know, but I think it starts by the type of conversation you're having with your kid, right? Like you just have to have this consistent culture of, have you even stopped to think about this from someone else's point of view? Or do you just assume everyone has two parents and their own bedroom and doesn't have to worry about where their next meal is coming from?
Mm-hmm.
That's it for this episode of The Slow Scroll. These are messy and important conversations, and we're glad you're in them with us. If something sparked your thinking or unsettled it, We hope you'll sit with it, talk about it, and bring it into your work with kids. You can connect with us, ask questions, or provide feedback using the link to the feedback form in the show notes. Feel free to share the episode, send it to a colleague, or keep the dialogue going in your own circles. Just don't stop talking about what matters.